Hello there, it's Simone. I am a fountain pen YouTuber, ink and journal YouTuber. So why don't I just say I'm a fountain pen, ink and journal YouTuber, and I'm so glad you're here. In today's video, I would like to show you a walkthrough of my completed Swatch book. I have swatched all of the inks that I own and also passed along in this notebook, and I recently changed into a new one because this was full, and I thought you would want to be interested in seeing what all I have swatched. I keep this notebook in a Midori Traveler's Notebook cover, actually Traveler's Company cover. I got mine in 2015 when the company still was branded Midori. And I used to swatch my inks in a personal size insert from Paper Penguin Co. Tomoe River 52 GSM paper. And I decided to switch things up and move into a bigger size. Currently, I am in love with the standard Traveler's Notebook size, so I decided to go to this one. This is another Paper Penguin Co. insert right here. And this was originally a A5 notebook that I cut down myself to standard size. I have only made 2 swatch pages in here. This is the first one, and this is the second. It looks very different from what you see here, but I think I really like having more inks on a page. And so that's what I'm going to swatch in moving forward. So this is a key that I'm not using anymore. Before I started using this, I had a notebook from Taroko shop that was 68 GSM, and it was cream paper and dot grid that I used for all the things. I used it for testing out pens, I used it for swatches, I used it for all the things. And so when I decided I was going to have a separate swatch book, I cut out all the papers that I was able to salvage and glued them into this notebook. So this is how I started out making swatches. I used to use a wet, watered down cotton swab to take off the ink and see if it was waterproof, I think. That was the reasoning behind. I used a paintbrush for this. This is when I wanted to match inks with the colors that were in this magazine clip. And what I'm doing, or what I still do now, is use a pencil and cross out all the samples that I don't currently own anymore. And I can already say that I need to update it because I actually have used up all of this, and I have used up all of this as well. Yeah, so I tried to match up all the colors in here. Not really sure it worked, but it was a great way to determine a color palette for inked pens. And then these are more of the samples that I swatched here. Then I tried, when I moved in here, I decided I was going to do it the same way, but it just didn't really work. And so then I was inspired by Mystery from Mystery Arts, who had set up her ink journal similarly. I think she does squares. I had or I still do have a stencil that puts down these circles, so I just used a pencil and put them on here to set them up. I started using both sides, but the 52 GSM paper is just too thin and bleeds through, so I wasn't able to do that. I then just went on to use only the right side, And if you have 52 GSM paper, then someone suggested in my comments on one of the videos, you could also just use both sides and then just skip a full spread. I decided not to do that, which is, you know, to each their own. That was what I decided to go with, and it's fine. I started swatching in this manner, I think in the December of 2021. Most of these are samples. Some of them I have already passed on, as you can see. These might seem a lot, but I really enjoy playing with inks, exploring these inks, and I don't feel, since I changed my mindset a tiny bit, don't feel pressured to use all of them in fountain pens. I acquire them through Inkflight, the Inkflight box from Ink Journal. I also get bottles sometimes, so this and this is a bottle. I still put the B here. I stopped doing that later on. These are all bottles as well. But all the samples that I have in my stash, I am content with exploring the ink a bit more by swatching them on Tomoe River paper as well as on mixed media paper. I love doing color comparisons, and that brings me so much joy that I am totally fine with having these ink samples in my stash without putting them into a fountain pen. I receive samples through the Inkflight box. I don't purchase samples myself at the moment, besides that box, which is 7 each month, and I am on hold until the month of August, or I hope that worked. I will have to wait for their reply and see if they actually got my email. But yes, I do receive samples from friends. There is often happy mail exchanges going on where we swap inks, or they just send inks because they like me and they know that I would love to try that ink. And that is totally fine. I'm really, really happy seeing the different properties. This one is a sheening ink. I like that this one has just a little teeny tiny halo instead of like this full-on sheen that you can sometimes see in inks that completely sheen. I will show you what I mean by that in a second. And then if I decide that I do not necessarily care for an ink, especially once I inked it in a pen and it just doesn't work for me, I do pass it along to friends. Currently, I am thinking of using a notebook as a color comparison notebook and deep dive a little bit more into these inks. So I'm currently holding on to all the samples that I have. But once I'm done with that color comparison, I think, again, all those inks that haven't been used in maybe a year will then be passed along to other people. These were the inks that I received in the ink swap that I organized in the fall of 2022. And I'm sure that I will be organizing one in August of 2023 as well. So if you're interested in participating, look out for the announcement. I will definitely announce it on Instagram as well as on YouTube. Yeah, so this is an ink that I don't necessarily care for. This is a sheening ink, so sheeny that you can't really see the base color in the writing. And so I didn't even put this in a pen. I pass it along to a friend right away. I do, especially with inks that are as interesting as this one, I try to get them in a pen really quickly, or with So the interesting ones, as well as the ones that I'm not so sure about, are the ones that end up in my pens more than the ones that I'm like, oh, I love this ink. Like this color I really like. Or this one. I'm super in love with how this ink looks. I haven't been able to put it in a pen because there were other inks that I was like, oh no, I don't know if I like this. So I put it in a pen to see how different it looks than it looks on the swatch. As you know, hopefully, if this is your first contact with swatching inks, I use a very wet nib, this Kakimori brass dip nib that holds a lot of ink, and the line width is so much wider, broader than a fountain pen. The flow is so much wetter that you get an idea of what the base color is, you get an idea of what the ink might look like, but seeing it in a fountain pen with putting it into an ink compartment, then having it go through a feed and coming out of a nib is a completely different writing experience, and not just writing experience, also ink experience than this. So this might give you an idea of what it might look like, but it might turn out to look completely different. It might turn to be unusable in various different nibs. But I'm aware of that, and I still enjoy doing this. So that's why I do it. And I love looking at these inks. Yes, I know that this ink might not perform in a fountain pen like this, but I can totally compare the different colors of these inks. Of course, since this is in a book, it's a bit harder to compare. I do have swatches on a different medium. Those are cards that I then also can reference as well. But I can see clearly that this ink is in a similar color, but this one has kind of a reddish halo around here. So this might be wetter, more pronounced. It might have it looks like it's a bit greener than this one. So I can compare the different colors. And when I'm putting together a color palette for my fountain pens, that's the way that I love inking up my fountain pens. This is definitely just how I love to play. This is not a necessity. You can find a fountain pen and find an ink, and you fall in love with this and always put the same ink into the same pen and totally be content. That's just how I love to play. This is fun for me, and that's why I do it. So yeah, when I put together a color palette, I go through this, I look through this, I see, these really speak to me. Which one will I go with? Maybe I already have a bluish ink in my in the picks that I already have. Maybe I want to go with a darker ink. Not sure, but this is where I look through, get inspired for a new color palette. I really love how these look together, for instance. So I could see myself using all 4 of those and then building a palette around this. Does that make sense to you? Some of the inks on this paper, again, there is so many amazing YouTubers out there that you totally should check out. But one person in particular I want to mention, which is Matt from The Wet Pen. He shared the Diamine Inkvent calendar in 2022. That's when I noticed him doing it. And he swatched these inks on various different papers. And you could see that the inks that he swatched on Tomoe River paper sometimes got a grayish tint to them, like this one. This is probably more vibrant on a different paper, but it's interesting to see how that happens to some inks, but not to all the inks. This one too. This one I had in a fountain pen just recently, and I absolutely loved it. If I was a person who bought a bottle of all the inks that I loved, then I would definitely get one of those. I am strongly considering getting a bottle of this ink. However, since I do have samples that are in a very similar color range, I want to see what this ink looks like in a pen before I get a bottle of this one. But I think it's different. Don't you agree? So yeah, the Diamine Inkvent I swatched on in a Hobonichi Weeks, which was a really great idea at the moment. However, I noticed that I never really referenced those. So I took out the pages and glued them in here. So I would be able, when I was putting together a color palette, to consider those in to the whole palette creation. And I am amazed at when I experienced this Inkvent, when I opened up all the little teeny tiny 12 milliliter bottles, I had a really hard time falling in love with many of those inks. And now, as I am swatching inks from friends, swatching inks from the ink flight, I am gravitating to some of these colors and noticing that, wait a minute, I saw a color that is super similar to this one already. And I often find it in these Diamine Inkvent swatches. This one, for instance, I just had in a pen, and I was so positively surprised at how much I liked it. So I really notice when I am swatching these inks that yeah, now we get into nerd territory. I start building a relationship with this ink. We communicate with each other, and the more I swatch, the more I understand about inks, for sure. And especially then putting it into a fountain pen is just the icing on the cake. This is the cake. The putting it into a fountain pen is the icing, and it sometimes confirms or surprises me in the way that the ink performs in the pen. I just recently put this ink that I really loved online into a pen, and I'm really not sure that this is a great ink for me. Unfortunately, I purchased a bottle. This was my Christmas present to myself. This one I just got because I looked through them. They were on sale on Amazon. And I looked through and I was like, I want two, because we said we were gifting each, like everybody got a present for $30. So the two of them would make $15, and I couldn't really find another one that I really loved. So I thought I'd experiment with this one. This one turns out to be one of my most favorite inks ever. This one is kind of disappointing, but that's okay. I am trying to stick to the rule to get a sample first, bottle second, and really keep my ink bottle collection very, very small. Why, you might ask? Because maybe I said that before. I am not a collector. I want to use the things that I have. And so I am currently thinking of purchasing bottles, but only bottles that I would then again want to share with friends. I recently published a video where I said that this ink was boring. I didn't mean it. It looks more boring than I think it will be in a pen. I really can't wait again to put this in a fountain pen. So I'm when I look through these, this inspires me. Man, I would love to use this next, or I would love to see how this performs in a fountain pen. So I pull the cards, and then I maybe have 4 that I really like, and then I try to make a rainbow palette. Basically, I really love the rainbow, and so that just fascinates me. It brings me joy to play with the cards, putting together a color palette in a rainbow format, then trying to figure out which pen goes with what ink, and then inking them up, and then seeing if what I thought was a good choice or if I totally didn't think this through and it's a complete fail. I passed along several of these inks. My friend Mari from Doodlestar Mari passed along 11 ink samples in December, and there were lots of them that were amazing, but some of them I wasn't so in love with. But I knew, for instance, that I think this one, maybe this one, I knew that my friend would love this, and so I passed it along to her. I also decided to send off some of the inks that I had received as samples from friends that were in my stash for over a year, and that is okay too. You know, maybe knowing your friends so well that you know that this might be an ink that they would love, when it doesn't serve me anymore, is totally okay. So here is these 3. This is when I noticed how gray the ink turned out. This is not how this ink looks on my swatch cards on the mixed media paper. So yeah, I really want to see what this ink looks like. I am a bit scared to put these into pens, but I am slowly getting to a collection of fountain pens where I know they are wet enough to support lighter inks like this, and so I'm really curious to see what they look like. I wasn't sure about this ink at all, but now I really want to put this in a pen. I want to explore these green golds, coffee colored inks more. I want to see what this looks like. This one looks very similar to Sailor Manyo Neko Yanagi, but this one is different. And this one I put in a pen, and I was so scared that I wouldn't like it because it's so bold, but I'm currently really loving it as well. And then we have lots of samples from friends again that I collected at a meetup. This one too. I'm not so sure that this is correct, because when I looked at a sample of Cowardly Lion online, it looked very, very brown. And I'm not sure where the purple then comes from. And this is from an ink swap with Casey. And this ink is so extremely wet. This one even more. So I'm not sure where I will put those, what pens I will put those in. This was the ink flight in February, and these were the inks that I received from Casey. And I actually have to say, I would love to put all of those into a pen. I might choose between one of those and one of those, and then maybe add a blue. Maybe this one and this one in here. But I really like those. I would love to see how these perform in pens. This is the only, no, that's not true. This is the second sample of Colorverse that I have. Colorverse Space Leica, and I think I also have Colorverse Brunch Date. But yeah, let me know how you swatch your inks. As it has hopefully been noticeable throughout this video, I do this because I enjoy it. This is not at all what you have to do when you have inks or fountain pens. I do this for the mere enjoyment of myself. I love it's like meditation for me. I love swatching the inks. I love writing their names. I love seeing them here. I love making the cards right next to them. And if I need to relax, this is what I do. So thank you so much for watching. I would love for you to subscribe if you haven't been a subscriber already. That's the really red button underneath the video. And I would love to hear in the comments what you do to swatch your inks. If you do, why you don't swatch them. I'd love to chat, as you know. You're the only people that I know that love and understand the way that I feel about fountain pens. And so I'm so happy to always talk to you. And I hope to see you soon. Until then, goodbye.